Really interesting discovery on Mars has caused a lot of people to say, wow, this could be intelligent life. People at NASA have said, we have found a sign of intelligent life on NASA, or pardon me, on Mars. So what is the sign? Is it a sign that says, hey, we're intelligent life, or come on in, or free cheeseburgers on Sunday? It's not. It's something that I guess you could look at and go, wait, that's a sign of intelligent life? Yeah, it is. Well, maybe. I mean, it depends on what we're actually seeing, and maybe it's all happenstantial, but man, they were quick to say signs of life because there are people who need there to be life on other planets. They need it for morally therapeutic reasons, because if there's life on other planets and it doesn't say so in the Bible, then, oh gosh, look, that. All of a sudden, God is disproven. So they need it to be the case. They need space aliens. And people have human needs. So we'll go through this and why these people said this is a sign of God. You'll see a great answer to this. But then we're going to explore further down into some experiments that looked to kind of create something that's a bit of a, I don't know, kind of a fun statement. Give enough monkeys enough keyboards and eventually they'll write a Shakespearean sonnet. Well, folks have tried that. So we'll talk about how that worked in a second. Now, I believe, and you know this about me, that I'm a huge proponent of intelligent design. And I'm a huge proponent that our DNA is, in fact, the Word. Now, not the Word, that God is the Word, Jesus is the Word is with God, the Word was God, but I think our DNA is every bit as much the Word. It is so obviously designed, so obviously intelligent. It's the most elegant code ever written, and it's also code that builds code. And it's hardware that builds hardware, far ahead of Elon Musk and his pipe dream of solving all the world's problem with robot friends, weird and creepy. There are people God has gifted to use his invention, of stem cells, to do remarkable things. My friends at Renew.Healthcare in Mexico, they use stem cells that they culture. This is what makes it illegal in the United States. So they'll take stem cells from umbilical cords. They reject 80% of the stem cells, 80% of the umbilical cords because they want the best stem cells. They're obsessed with safety. They never want to pass on any form of illness, a bloodborne pathogen or disease, anything like that. They screen everybody for cancer. I'm going down again. I know I'm going to have to go to cancer screening. I know that because they don't want to do anything to harm you. The stem cells that they culture then allow them to have the best stem cells in the highest numbers, and they control all the quality. Right now, I'm going down there. I'm going to meet a couple. I've talked to them on video. The woman, the wife, is suffering from ALS. She just found out. They're going to use the stem cells, and they think they can double her life expectancy from 6 years to 12 because these stem cells destroy inflammation. That's the first thing they do. They also rebuild tissue. There's people who are being told you're going to have a cartilage replacement. That might be the case because these stem cells can rebuild cartilage and tendon and muscle. So go check them out at renew.healthcare. It's RENUE.healthcare. Tell them you're part of the Todd Herman Show family. You may not need to have that surgery. Or Renew, RENUE.healthcare. This is this discovery on Mars that had people, NASA types, saying, intelligent life, intelligent life. I think this is a pretty good response to this. They found a square.
Why is everyone talking about the square structure captured on Mars? People are looking at this square and they're saying, well, there's obviously aliens had to have visited Mars or been on Mars at some point because there's a square and squares can't just form naturally. So it's an obvious example of intelligence, which is really interesting that is examples of intelligence. You have these people who are very smart and they'll look at something like this and they'll say, oh, okay, this is obvious evidence of design, when it, a little debatable. But then they'll look at something like DNA or even something like photosynthesis in a plant, which is an incredibly complex chemical reaction that sunlight is being turned into sugar and we don't even understand how it works. And they're like, oh yeah, that's just chance processes over many millions of years.
Elementary, my dear Watson.
And it shows Romans 1 of we're suppressing the truth and unrighteousness. It's not following the evidence wherever it leads unbiased. It's a worldview that you interpret all the evidence through, and that suppresses the creator because ultimately it usually comes down to we don't want to do what God tells us to do.
So why would they say at all? By the way, that's from Answers in Genesis, which is a great channel, great resource. So why would they say that a square is intelligent design? Because they're right. A perfect square does not happen in nature. There's things that look square. They look square-ish. But if a square was a sign of intelligent life, you're telling me that an eyeball is not? The designs of our bodies speak to an intelligence that you can read. You can read the intelligence expressed through readable, writable, repeatable, testable code. That's in our DNA. The fact that we can read DNA means our brains were set up to be able to decode it. If a square is a sign of intelligent design, an eyeball, a body, bodies that build bodies, code that writes code, hardware that creates hardware, that has to be then a sign of an even larger intelligence. I'm pretty certain you could teach a monkey how to make something square-like. I mean, there's some intelligent primates. You could teach a gorilla how to sand something down and to make it square-like. They've got opposable thumbs. Is it going to be perfectly square? No. Are they going to be able to measure it with a ruler? No. They can learn sign language. Okay, that's great. Can they formulate a thought, write a book? No. There's this saying forever that people have merchandised. If you give enough monkeys enough keyboards, eventually they're going to write a Shakespearean sonnet. I once read a book I'll tell you about. In a chapter in that book, a professor was given an opportunity to test this theory, and I'll tell you what happened with him. I researched this. This comes out of Australia. Universe would die before monkey with keyboard writes Shakespeare. Study finds. And it took a study to do this. Australian mathematicians call into question the infinite monkey theorem in a new research on an old adage. The paper tested the infinite monkey theorem, a thought experiment demonstrating that an infinite amount of time can make something that is incredibly unlikely to become probable by asking what would happen if generous yet finite limits were placed on the monkey typists. Their calculations were based on a monkey spending about 30 years typing 1 key a second at a keyboard with 30 keys. The letters of the English language plus some common punctuation. It found that the time it would take for a typing monkey to replicate Shakespeare's work would be longer than the lifespan of our universe. To broaden out the experiment, the Australian mathematicians turned to chimpanzees, the closest relative of humans. They're not our relatives, but you can choose to pretend. There are currently about 200,000 chimps on Earth, and the study presumed this population would remain stable until the end of time. Even this massive monkey workforce fell very, very short. It's not even like a 1 in a million, study co-author Stephen Woodcock of the University of Technology, Sydney, told New Scientist. If every atom in the universe was a universe in itself, it wouldn't happen. And even if many more chimps who typed out much quicker were added to the equation, still not plausible that monkey labor will ever be a viable tool for developing written words of anything beyond the trivial, the authors wrote in the study. A previous trial into the thought experiment, which gave 6 Sulaxi-crested macaque monkeys 4 weeks with the computer, produced just 5 pages of text, primarily filled with the letter S. Interesting. S. I guess monkeys like S. There was another experiment that actually tried this. I have a book called God Does Exist. It's a former atheist who became a Christian by virtue of intelligent design. And he got to do the experiment. He got to work with primates. He gave them treats. Every time they went to the keyboard that was covered in plastic, they got treats. And every time they went down, they were recording what they typed. I think this experiment went on for a year. It had a small number of monkeys, but he wasn't looking for a Shakespearean sonnet. He was looking for a word. What was the shortest word or longest that they wrote? What do you think it was? I mean, what's the shortest word in the English language? A or I? Guess how many times that happened? Not once. Not once. I mean, there were A's, but they're always back to back with another letter. There was never A space or I space. That study led him to go and do the math about our DNA. If you think Shakespeare is complicated, and it is, imagine believing that DNA, code that writes code, came about through the random mutation. But there's a problem. As far back as we go with species, we keep finding this pesky DNA. We have yet to find a life form that isn't built on language. Useful, repeatable, knowable, testable, falsifiable language. In other words, the word.